Hi, everybody. I've just returned from the theater to see the movie The Lost Weekend, a love story, which was done in 2022. And it's still fresh in my mind. I've jotted down a bunch of notes here. I wanted to get my feelings out right away. I think this is a movie that's going to still require more thinking and really thinking twice about things I thought I knew and challenging my old views and maybe coming up with some new ones. But I did my best to prepare this initial reaction, okay? This film was about 94 minutes, and I have some pros and cons. But before I tell you, even though there are cons here that I'm going to tell you at the end, things that I kind of question or didn't care for, overall, that didn't hurt the fact that I thought this was an excellent film, even with the warts, so to speak. It's an excellent film as a story. It tells a wonderful story between two people, May Pang and John Lennon. And this movie is told, you have to know this and you have to remember this, from May Pang's perspective, her own personal story, the way she views these events. This is not a third party or anything. And of course, John Lennon is not here to tell his side of the story. This is May Pang's perspective. And also her motives. Okay, remember her, she got motives and she's got a perspective. So this is largely her chance to tell her story. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that the timing of this is very curious because, of course, Yoko Ono is not in good shape right now. Unfortunately, Yoko has some kind of a problem. We don't know exactly what it is. There's stories that have circulated. I'm not going to just say what I think it is, but I know she's not doing as well as we'd like. And, you know, after all, Yoko has turned 90 years old recently. And it's interesting that this is the time that May puts this out. I don't think we would have seen a film like this uh, 10, 15, 20 years ago, even though she could have told her story at any time. Because, you know, but at this time, Yoko can't really protest, or really, I don't think, can really say what she thinks is incorrect or whatever. But again, you got to take this from May Pang's perspective. Well, first of all, I don't know how to go about this exactly. I think I'm going to talk about the good stuff, of which there's a lot, and then some stuff that I'm questioning. First of all, this film gave me a newfound respect for May Pang. Um, Sometimes I think I could be lukewarm with regard to May and her role in the history of John Lennon. I figure she's just the other woman. I know she loved John, but I think she sometimes, I used to, past tense, think that she goes too far sometimes, and maybe present tense too, now that I think of it. But as far as, while she acknowledges at the end of the film, she says John loved three women: Cynthia, Yoko, and herself, May. But I think she really thinks that John and her were really the main item, and I almost get the feeling that she thinks that she, May Pang, was John Lennon's truest love. I get that feeling from her, but that's again her perspective. She would feel that way. Also, I will say that this film was very emotional, very intriguing. I was interested. It was gripping, and it had me totally intrigued from beginning to end. I think it was well done as a movie, as a documentary. It had everything you could want as far as a clear narrative, well told story, as I said earlier. Just a very good job as a film, generally speaking. And I also think that as far as from fans' perspective, okay, talking about as a fan here speaking, a lot of people want to know, well, what's in it for fans. This offers a lot of rare footage that even I haven't seen before, and I've seen a lot of it. You see stuff like some of John and Yoko's early films, a little clips of that, home movies, raw footage that you don't usually get to see, interviews that you don't usually see, photos I've never seen before, some of them. And yeah, like I said, all of this makes for a very emotional film that affected me to the point where I had tears at times, and especially at the end. I came out of there a little spellbound, a little teary, because it really was that effective. It did its job as an emotionally involving piece of work. So yeah, you're going to see it again. To backtrack again, I'll be all over the place with this, folks. Sorry. From a fan perspective, there's a lot of stuff you're going to like seeing. Also, of course, you're going to see stuff like I was happy to see in here, like footage of the Beatles in the the mid '70s when they were going to dissolve their contract, and you see uh, Paul and George getting together to sign the papers to dissolve the Beatles, and at the kind of uncomfortable moment. And uh, John didn't sign the papers at the time; he did it later on in Florida. Uh, but we'd seen that already, and we know about that from, I believe it was the Martin Scorsese, George Harrison documentary, Living in the Material World. But what I like is the way everything's put together. Everything is formed here into a nice package to have the whole story and all the footage that you need in the right spots to really tell a good linear story and account of all the events. So I really did like that from a fan's perspective. Also, I liked very much how we learned a little bit about May Pang's childhood. And, it was kind of a traumatic childhood in ways, which I'll let you see. And very interesting to find out how she was brought up, May, and how she came to eventually land a dream job working for John and Yoko, which is pretty amazing. And of course, then we have the historic core of the story where one day as an employee, Yoko told May, "We're not getting along, John and I want you to go out with him." And May refused, didn't want to do it. She had no interest in going out with John. It's Yoko's husband. This is your husband. I have no interest in he's yours, not mine. And I always say that, May was very young, but I always say that she could have quit. I know look, I wouldn't want to quit a job working for John and Yoko, but if you had that much resistance to it, I always think you could have quit personally. But okay, she opted not to. And I like the way that it's shown how, despite her sometimes sad moments with her dad as a child, she was able to be confident, and she was able to bring herself up, get her job, and be determined. So I like that she just decided to just do it. She went with it, John, and became his mistress, really, under Yoko's consent. Now, a lot of people talk about, how Yoko really, it's crazy the way she instructed May, you will go out with him, and that's that. You'll go out with him, period. And she's crazy and all this. I think it makes sense. I think Yoko was a smart cookie here. Obviously, John's going to go out with other women. John's going to fool around. Why not keep it in the family, so to speak, as a matter of speaking, with the person who works for you? Yoko could keep an eye on things and could actually make sure that she knows who John's with, who's somebody that she trusts and likes a lot. So that was pretty smart, I think. But what she didn't count on, Yoko, was that, of course, May and John would fall in love. And especially from May's point of view, she's like totally in love with John Lennon. She fell for him like a ton of bricks. And John fell in love with May as well. So that's the story. And also in this film, you get lots of observations from Julian Lennon. And I like Julian Lennon's, observations are very, very important and very revealing. And I like those a lot. Also in the film, they do deal with the issue of John's violent moments, the fact that he had these incidents in his life, clips of John admitting himself that he's basically was a violent guy trying not to be violent. And that's a whole subject for another video. That gets blown out of proportion these days. What I liked about the film is, And I was wondering if they were going to do this. I think that if you are on the fence about John Lennon and you watch this film, you understand again that John had a lot of problems. John could have a violent tendency, but that's why he always was going on about peace. He was always trying to deal with this. He was always trying to, almost like through therapy, if you will, trying to be a better man and trying to keep those negative sides of his personality more at bay. And I like the fact that after all is said and done, you do get the feeling from this film that John was basically a funny, nice, good-hearted, sensitive kind of guy who just had a human side to him that, in the sense that it wasn't very becoming at times. I think that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing about John Lennon. A lot of people who are anti-John say, oh, a lot of people make excuses for John. They say he's very honest, he's very human. But yeah, that's why I like John. That's why he's my favorite Beatle and always has been. He's more of a real person with flaws and all. Is why I like him, and that's why I think the Beatles as a foursome worked so well. All four of them had different personalities, and John and Paul in particular were different in that regard. Paul was much more appealing to people. He seemed to be more easy to talk to, get along with, and all that. So it was a good mixture. Well, I've said a lot of good things about this movie, and I really loved it. Loved it. I really came out of there thinking this is one of the best of all documentaries on any of the Beatles, and John Lennon in particular. And I think it hit its target, so to speak, what May Pang wanted to say and what she wanted to come across. Now, some of the cons I have about this thing. When I was going into this movie, a few people, I think 3 people, told me that they'd seen the movie already, and in their words, May Pang doesn't say anything bad about Yoko. I don't know what film they were watching, but let me tell you, one of my big problems with this movie is Yoko is skewered in here. She is absolutely savage. Now, it's not that May comes out and says Yoko is a so-and-so. Yoko, she doesn't talk a lot of crap about Yoko, but the way the story goes and the way it's presented and some of the illustrations they have, there's some drawings and, animation and stuff like that. It really makes Yoko look bad in this movie. And I don't think that right now that May Pang has a lot of good feelings about Yoko, and it comes through. Problem is for those people out there, and there are a lot of them, who don't like Yoko, who hate Yoko haters, and la 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 la, blah blah blah. They're only going to get more reinforcement. That's the bad thing here. I don't really like the fact that that's the case. Now, for example, in order to tell her side of the story, May Pang, of course, is sure to use the most unflattering moments and clips of Yoko. Most of the pictures and quotes of Yoko are not the best, not her best moments, obviously. Where she could have used better moments. For example, there's a moment where May Pang says Yoko did an interview with herself. She kind of like frowns on that. And she shows some kind of clip where Yoko is on one side and Yoko's on the other side. Look, and they're kind of, Yoko's interviewing Yoko, But the thing is, I've seen many, many interviews with Yoko, not by herself, by other people interviewing Yoko, people who are impartial, and Yoko told a lot more to this story than you see in this film. Obviously, May doesn't want you to know that. Likewise, there's a story that we've heard before. We've seen it in one of the documentaries, and I can't remember what the documentary was. It might have been John Lennon, New York City. It might have been, I think it's John Lennon, New York City, NYC. I'm not sure. But there's a story how during this lost weekend, John was really going crazy one night. He was out of his mind, and he was in the car. He's screaming and he's yelling. That story is recounted here too. John's screaming, John's yelling. I don't know if it's Jim Keltner, the drummer, who actually tells the story. But I was waiting for certain parts to come in that May left out. In other words, in these other documentaries from the past, Jim Keltner, or whoever's telling the story now, if memory recalls, it was Keltner, says how John was screaming in the car, yes, but he was going, Yoko, Yoko, and he was kicking the car out. They had to restrain him. He was screaming. He wanted to be with Yoko. He wanted Yoko. That part of the story is not in May's movie, obviously, right? And another thing that's not at all in this movie is the fact that we've heard many times from other sources. This is why you got to watch everything. You got to watch May's movie. You got to watch other movies and documentaries. Make up your own mind. John, supposedly, people always told the story that John would call Yoko constantly. He got on that phone. He was like, Yoko, I want to come home. Yoko, I want to come home. Yoko, I want to come home. And Yoko kept saying, no, John, you're not ready. It's not time yet. You're not ready. And all this. Yoko in this film is portrayed as completely controlling, completely domineering. A lot of you people out there will say, well, duh, no kidding, that's Yoko. But I think there are other sides to Yoko, and I think this film really, like I said, paints a bad portrait, which I don't think is, I'm not too crazy about that. But anyway, like I said, you get no indication from this movie that John ever wanted desperately to go back with Yoko. There's none of that in here. May's not about to tell you that John really wanted to go back to Yoko. If you watch this, you would think throughout the entire relationship with May Pang, John was like, Yoko? Yoko who? What's a Yoko? I know that's May's perspective, again, from May's point of view. But John eventually, as we know, did go back to Yoko at the end. And, the way May portrays it in the film, it's almost like, why? You got to ask yourself a question. I know I broke off my thought here. Why would John go back to Yoko after this? If John is so happy with May and everything's going so perfectly with May, and it's the best love he's ever had with May, why would he go back to Yoko? Did Yoko offer to give him $1 billion to go back with her? No. Did Yoko say, if you don't come back to me, I'll kill you in your sleep? I'm being outrageous. No. So how? I guess May Pang would have you believe that Yoko used magic or witchcraft on John or hypnotized him or something. I gotta say, there's only one reason, plausible reason, why when John's weighing the two, there's only May or Yoko. There's only one reason why he would have gone back to Yoko. That's got to be his truest love. I mean, at the end, he had to make a choice, and he chose Yoko. I can't imagine any other reason why he would have gone back with her, except for the fact that that's the one he really wanted the most, even more than May. That's all I could think. So, yeah, those are my real pet peeves with it. I came away. I'm going to be fair here. I came away thinking less of Yoko. Because, everybody knows I'm a Yoko defender. I'm always defending Yoko. The reason I defend Yoko Ono is because John loved her, John loved strong women, and John felt that Yoko was perfect for him and his soulmate. So because of that, I accept Yoko. That's all it comes down to. For John's sake, I accept it. I accept her. But even this film does a good job of making even a staunch Yoko fan like me and defender of Yoko, even makes me scratch my head and say, I don't know about her. The way this is. That's why I say, I urge everybody to watch this film. It's great film. But don't let this be your gospel alone. You have to also read other books. You have to watch other John Lennon documentaries. Imagine John Lennon, 1988. You have to watch Give Me Some Truth. You got to watch, oh boy, I'm forgetting, Above Us Only Sky. Watch John Lennon, New York City, NYC, the U.S. versus John Lennon. There's so many documentaries. Then take everything, all the interviews. And there's very positive interviews with Yoko. Not the kind of like weird, odd, negative, uncaring versions that are put in this documentary for a purpose. All right? But I do think a little more of May Pang, so that's a good thing. I'm more of a May Pang fan for this, although I still wonder if a lot of this isn't exaggerated, in a way. She makes it sound as if she and John were going to have a relationship maybe forever, and maybe John would have left Yoko, and he never divorced Yoko, at least not up to the point where he was killed. But a lot of people out there, which concerns me, are going to think of this as gospel. don't do that. You know what I mean? It's great though. It is great, but is it the only gospel? There's so many sides to this, so many versions of this, so many different perspectives is a good word. Perspectives, points of view, interviews with people who knew John and Yoko, that you have to form an overall opinion by studying it all. That's all I'm asking. But I gotta say though, John himself always maintained that this was a lost weekend. And John said that he felt lost. He said, I thought it was going to be like being a bachelor again. Woohoo! Then he said it was bloody awful. John said it was bloody awful. John changed his mind all the time. I will admit that when you watch this film, I think we see a relaxed John with May Pang. I think we see a happy John with May Pang. You look at the photos, the actual film clips, hear the actual dialogue, and it's hard to think that John was miserable. But stories from other people who were with him too during that period say he had some miserable times without Yoko. And John went on record as saying that to him it was a lost weekend, not a fantastic creative adventure as presented here. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Overall, I thought this was an excellent film. Yeah, I criticize things, but that doesn't change the fact that it's well made, with great footage, tells a story that's very captivating and makes you very, very touched and emotional about it. Thumbs up.